Right then, I'm going to show you how I went from being a close-up magician doing sleight of hand magic tricks at parties and weddings to a stand-up comedian.
Who else is f***ing freezing? Just me.
Telling jokes I've written at comedy clubs and dirty old pubs with 3 people in the audience, but more of that later on.
Fist flaps.
Basically, I'm going to talk you through my journey. This is my journey. This is my journey. This is my journey. My journey. This is my journey, yeah. Essentially, my time developing my comedy act, how I went from magic to comedy, and hopefully just give you an insight into what it's like to pursue stand-up comedy, whilst giving a glimpse into the northern comedy circuit. Because I recorded pretty much videos of every gig I did, so you'll be able to see how I honed my act, which jokes worked, which jokes didn't. But before we get into any of that, at the end of this video, I'm going to show my full routine, my tight 10.
Tight 10. Tight 10.
My full 10-minute act that I'd honed over about 18 months. The 10 minutes that I could always rely on, no matter where I went. That was my tight 10. Tight. And this was the last gig I did before we went into lockdown. So if you fancy seeing the full act with a fresh pair of eyes without spoilers on what went into the making of it, I recommend you skip to the end. And then if you want to see the journey, skip back to now and I'll talk you through it. Choice is yours. But before we dive in, I'm not claiming I'm some sort of big shot comic who was touring the UK playing the O2. Before lockdown, I was just about starting to make the transition from open mic level to middle spot level. So 10 minutes, nice and quick. Essentially a tryout spot, and then you develop your act, you get 20 minutes, and you try and apply for the opener spot. And then you get good enough and you make a name for yourself, and then you try out for the headliner spot. That's well ahead at this point. But it all starts with open mics. Before you can even think about getting paid to do stand-up comedy, you've got to get noticed at an open mic, or at least develop your act at an open mic before applying for middle spots. And these open mics are generally free to perform and free for the audience to come and watch. And so they should be, because most of the time, new comedians are absolute garbage, me included. And my first gig was a charity gig, an open mic night in the basement of a pub. And looking back on it, it was a pretty decent gig. It was a nice layout, it was a good turnout, good audience. They were up for it, and the night had been, you know, it was a well-established night, it was decent. But I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was I was shitting myself like I'd never been that nervous for anything. It was mental. And like I said, I was a close-up magician for quite a while, 2 or 3 years before doing this, so I'm not exactly new to performing. I don't get nervous doing tricks, but for some reason, I was so nervous about this. It was ridiculous. Like, I remember going down the basement to check out the gig beforehand, and I was that nervous, I fell down the stairs. My balls have dropped, by the way. I'm just getting nervous talking about it. Fell down the stairs and somehow never spilt my pint, which says a lot, doesn't it? But yeah, that's before I even got on stage, so you can imagine what it was like. I guess because it was just new to me. I'd never done it before, and it was one of them things that it's pretty scary when you first try it. Now, I say it was all new to me. When I first did that first gig, I was pretty much doing standard tricks. It was a comedy magic act. Standard tricks that I'd added a little bit of my own spin on. And I'd written a few of my own lines just for that night, some of which got little laughs.
So I've been doing magic and making my dad question his life choices since the age of 10. So 2 full years now.
And some of which just died on their ass.
Right, 52 cards in a pack. Every single card is different. Except for that one. Just me on that one, that's good. Right.
But I learnt a lot from that gig. And even though it was a mediocre act, I guess, at the end of the day, I was still buzzing. I was honestly just on a high. It was class. I'd never felt out like it.
King of Diamonds.
And I think half of it was just, I was used to having to earn an audience. As a wedding magician, you'd walk up to a table of strangers, you've got to prove to them that you're worth watching. They're not there to watch magic, they're there for a crack and having a nice chat with the family. Suddenly this magician interrupts and they've got to prove themselves. So you constantly try to earn their attention to watch you. Whereas with a stand-up gig, you turn up and all the audience are there to see a show. That's class. That was an alien concept to me. So I turned up and they're all up for it and I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. Let's do it. So after that gig, suddenly stand-up was no longer this like unattainable, mysterious thing. It was something that, if I put my mind to it, I might actually be alright at.
If you've enjoyed the show, my name's Jack. If not, my name's Harry Potter. Thank you very much.
So I booked another gig, and I slowly got better at it. Just the simple things you wouldn't even think about before you did it. Stuff like how to handle the mic when you first get up on stage, because, you know, it can be quite awkward if you don't know what you're doing.
Right then. Get rid of the mic. How are we? We good? Yeah? Excellent.
Because you can read as many books as you want, but until you get on stage and actually do it, none of it means anything. And I'd take a video of every gig, I'd watch the recordings back, constantly rewrite the routines, the little jokes, take out the jokes that didn't work, try and expand on the jokes that did work, write entirely new jokes, test them out.
So my name's Jack, I know what you're thinking, that kid from Home Alone has let himself go.
And because it was a magic act, I'd try out different tricks, see which worked for bigger crowds. And which ones needed different methods. Like I remember a specific example was I needed a way of getting a lot of people in the room involved in the trick. So what I'd do is I'd throw a random object into the audience.
So you don't think I've got someone who's in on it, I'm going to chuck something at the crowd, and whoever catches this thing we're going to use for the trick, alright? So I'm going to chuck something into the crowd. So get ready as I chuck this brick into the crowd.
And then just by doing it, I realised maybe throwing a foam brick around a room full of glasses and drinks isn't such a good idea.
Okay, can you chuck the brick to somebody else? I didn't think this through, did I? Rather close call.
But these are the things you don't realise until you actually go out and try it. Unless you've got more than one brain cell, in which case common sense would tell you just don't do that in a room full of glasses. But every new gig I did, I'd start off with a little bit of stand-up at the start before I did any tricks. Because in my head at the time I was thinking, well, you know, if I die on my ass with the stand-up bit at the start, at least I can recover it somewhat with the tricks at the end because I know they'll work. And that's the thing with stand-up, it's instant feedback. You know instantly if a joke's good or not because they'll either laugh or just stare at you awkwardly immediately.
Looking like you've shit yourself, wearing nothing but a nappy and clogs. Not a good look, to be honest.
Whereas with a trick, it's slightly different. You might have a 5-minute trick, and for 4 minutes, they're bored out of their heads while you do the process of the trick until the big finish when it's dead good. But that's no good for stand-up. It's a safety net, provided you get it right, which I guess is the benefit of stand-up. Because if you get a joke wrong, you can just move on and tell another joke. Whereas if you get a trick wrong, you've done all that build-up, and then you've got the wrong card or the wrong prediction, you just look like a right knob. There's no two ways about it. So what I'm saying is you quickly find out which jokes work and which jokes don't. And I remember the first time I said a joke that was nothing to do with magic, and it was about my family. And I remember it word for word.
So my name's Jack, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My dad's from Yorkshire, proper working class Yorkshireman. My mum's Dutch, she's from the Netherlands, born and raised.
So it makes me half Yorkshire, half Dutch, which is why I'm a lanky streak of piss and you'll never see me get my wallet out. And I'm not going to beat around the bush, I'm pretty sure my dad voted for Brexit just to get rid of me mum.
And that was amazing. That was instantly more satisfying than any of the tricks I'd done. Because that was just me. I'd written that. That was entirely me. I'm not hiding behind a trick. That was a joke I'd written and I'd got that response. Amazing. The buzz you get off that is brilliant. And from that point on, I just kept writing more and more bits for the intro. So I'd do a bit of pure stand-up at the start and then magic towards the end. And the more I did it, the more the comedy at the start became the spotlight for me, and the magic kind of went out the window. I wasn't really interested in that bit because I'd been there, done that sort of thing. But not for the audiences. They always loved the magic. And it used to annoy me a bit, actually, that the audience used to find the magic so much better than the comedy, that kind of became a joke in itself.
A perfect match. Now look, it don't matter how many clever jokes I do now, the best bit you're going to remember is still a fire coming out the wallet, isn't it? You want to say it again? Here we go. You want to say, you've come around specifically to say that, eh? F*** off. Bastards.
Because I put so much more effort into the stand-up than I did the magic tricks. A lot of the tricks I'd done were just tried and tested routines that I'd done at weddings hundreds of times. They were entertaining, but I wouldn't say they were particularly original.
Your card goes somewhere into the middle of the pack. There's nobody your card can be on the bottom. It can't be over there. It can't be over there. It definitely can't be there. It definitely can't be there. Folks, I'm going to keep doing it until Di looks like she's enjoying herself. I'll be honest, we might be here a while.
But you know, to be fair, they were decent tricks, and I can understand why, if you're an audience member and you've seen 4 or 5 pure stand-up comedians, it might be refreshing to see something a bit different. But the magic wasn't the challenging bit for me. I knew I could do that, and I knew I had lines for every single thing that could happen because I'd done it hundreds of times before.
But if it works, Di should be one card flying out of the pack, and hopefully... I'll just put that on the floor for a second.
But I wanted a challenge. That's what I wanted. I wanted to do my own original stand-up. And that's where the whole talking about my family thing came about. Because I'd heard loads of horror stories about people who'd had the material stolen from them They go to an open mic, they tell a few jokes, some of them are good, and then they go to another comedy night and someone else is telling the jokes that they just said. And joke theft and nicking people's acts is rife in both the comedy world and the magic world, but that's something entirely different, which we'll leave for another day. Point being, that's why I decided to talk about my family, because I thought if I talk about my specific upbringing, being half Yorkshire, half Dutch, and make most of the jokes around that, there's no chance that anyone's going to nick that act.
Oh, you're Belgian, but you live in Holland? Yeah. Right, that's not
Because of her.
Because of her. Oh, right. Are you Dutch?
Yeah.
You are Dutch. What's your name? Say that again.
No one in the right mind is going to want to pretend they're half Yorkshire and half Dutch. It's bad enough talking about it when it's true.
My dad's from Yorkshire, proper working class Yorkshireman. Thank you.
And as I started developing my act and getting more confident with it, I started experimenting with stuff, trying out new things, and that's where the idea came to do the story of the cards, tell the story of how I shit myself, but at the same time do a trick, like combining pure stand-up with a magic trick, kind of merge the two together, and that's what my latest video where I did that card trick was. But I used to do that as part of the act.
So I farted not once, not twice, but 3 times I farted. And on that third fart, I thought, oh, that's a bit wet.
And I did stuff like that for a little while, but then I binned it off because it wasn't getting as many laughs as I wanted. See, the thing is with stand-up, they always gone about your laugh rate, how many laughs you're getting per minute, gag rate, laugh per minute. Basically, the top comedians are getting about 6 big laughs per minute, which is 1 big laugh every 10 seconds, which on the face of it sounds like, oh, that's doable. That's proper hard, that. Particularly hard when you're doing it in the context of magic tricks. I just found that doing tricks, it's very hard to make the process of it particularly funny. And that's why I started mixing the stand-up with it to get that laugh rate up. And when you watch the 10 minutes at the end, you'll see that I just about managed that for 10 minutes. It's a whole different story if you want us to stay in that laugh rate for an hour or an hour and a half show. That's where you really see how good the pros are. And this is why I tried to record every gig I did. And if there's any new comedians watching this looking for tips, I'd recommend record every gig you can, whether it's video or audio. Video's better, it's not always doable. Because no matter how well you think it went in your head, there's always room for improvement. For example, I picked up on something very early on that I still haven't been able to get out of my system, and it's the fact that I always say, I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? And although I'd made a conscious effort to stop saying I still find myself doing it every now and then. And now that I've said it, when you watch the 10-minute set at the end, it'll become painfully obvious every time I say it. But these are the things you pick up on. And little things like that you want to try and cut out, because you want to be thinking about it quite clinically. If you're thinking about laughs per minute, you want to trim the fat. Cut out any words that aren't required to make the joke work. Make it as efficient as possible. And it sounds boring and laborious, but it's such a good feeling. Constantly refining your set and making it better, making it funnier, making it more efficient. It's great. I'd say stand-up is one of the most rewarding things you can do because of that feeling. And just knowing that you have the ability to make a room full of strangers laugh. Knowing that you've got an act that's good enough that people will pay money to go and see it at a comedy night. Knowing that you can do something that most people will be too scared to do. That's an unreal feeling. I mean, it does wonders for your self-confidence alone, but you also learn skills that you probably wouldn't learn anywhere else. It's class. Now, I've probably painted quite a rosy picture, shall we say, of what it's like to pursue stand-up comedy, but the reality is, it's hard work and quite often brutal, especially when you play northern working class pubs that just put on a random open mic night as opposed to like a dedicated comedy club that's putting on shows every night. Because these little pubs are often filled with people who haven't necessarily gone out to watch comedy, and believe you me, these people will let you know if they think you're shit. I remember one gig, it was in the middle of nowhere, it was a Tuesday night, and there was 4 blokes, proper rough and ready blokes, drinking Guinness, watching the footy. It was like something out of Phoenix Nights. And they were sat right in front of the stage area. And what had happened was they didn't realise a comedy night was on, and the MC of the night had to come over, basically tell them to move out of the way because they were going to put the stage there. I mean stage, elevated platform with a mic and a mic stand. And he turned off the footy, and just out of sheer spite and getting pissed off, they decided, right, sod you, I'm going to sit right on the front then. And they sat literally right in front of the mic and the comedians. It was such an odd thing. These 4 guys were fuming. They were right there. They're pissed off because they're not watching the footy and they're watching some crap comedians come on, try out some new stuff. And they were heckling the acts, shouting at them. It was just brutal. And looking back, it's kind of understandable why they were so annoyed, but at the time, they weren't exactly making themselves very popular. And I was on in the middle of the show, and it went, surprisingly, alright. I basically made it my mission to take the piss out of the ringleader of that group of 4, and although it was a risky strategy, it kind of paid off, because I earned their approval by taking the piss out of him.
Just a huge build-up and a disappointing climax. Doug knows exactly what I'm talking about.
The worst thing is,
But the comedian that went on after me, and you're going to think I'm making this up, and I don't have a video recording of this, so you just have to trust me, but this genuinely happened. The comedian came on after me, and for whatever reason, the ringleader of the group just took an instant disliking to them. They were talking through the act, they were heckling, and just in the middle of the act, he got up, and he went, "This is shit, I'm going to go for a smoke." And he got up in the middle of the set and just left. Which would have been alright, except for the window where the smoking shelter was right next to the stage. And this guy knew that. So the whole while the comedian was talking, he was looking through the window at the audience, giving it the wanker sign, giving it the fingers, all that. The comedian was just totally oblivious to the whole thing. It was tragic. The audience is laughing, but they're laughing at the guy in the window, not the comedian. It was, and he didn't want to say out. Anyway, then the guy, turns out he had a false set of teeth, because he pulls out this entire false set of teeth, like the chatter ones. Well, that's what it looked like anyway. And he's gurning, he's full on pulling his face, like his bottom lip over his face, smothering it in front of the window, and the place is howling laughing, and the comedian's like, "Oh, this is going dead well." And he starts rubbing his fake teeth against the window. Just, honestly, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Anyway, the comedian eventually caught on, and you know, you could see part of them just died inside, and they put the microphone back in the mic, didn't even say goodbye, and they just walked off. And it was one of the most brutal things I've ever seen. It was like the worst heckle ever, except for they didn't even know they were being heckled for most of the time. And that was kind of the reality of what it was like in these little pubs. Just generally, I'd say, a hostile environment, and you really got to prove yourself. It's a proper test of character. And other times, you turn up to a pub and there'd be a handful of people, and it'd be almost pointless. I remember one time I drove to a gig and there was 3 people in the audience. 2 hours to get to the gig, 3 people. What's the point in that? Because it doesn't give you anything. Because people react differently to jokes when they're in a crowd. Try to tell your normal set to a group of 3 people sat in front of you. You just don't get anything out of it, neither do they. It was just 4 hours there and back for 3 people in the audience. Another one I did, travelled another 2 hours to Liverpool, and got there, and the entire audience was made up of 6 comedians who were on that night. So you're not going to get a normal response off them. You don't learn anything because they're too busy analysing your act.
And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm pretty sure my dad voted for Brexit just to get rid of me mum.
Another time, I travelled an hour and a half to Manchester, and I turned up and it was great. Room was packed, it was going to be a good gig. But because I was 20 minutes late because of traffic, couldn't get there in time to put my name down for a decent spot in the night. So I went on last. And by the time I went on, most of the audience had left, and I performed to like 10 people in the audience, and it's just awkward.
Especially if you snap your banjo string.
And I wouldn't have minded all that if it wasn't for the driving, because I live in the Lake District, and stand-up comedy gigs here happen once in a blue moon. So I'd have to drive to like the major northern cities, Manchester, Liverpool, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, rush hour traffic, after work, and I'd get home after the gig like midnight, 1 in the morning, and I'd be up again at 5:30 for work for my normal day job. And it was just, you can't do that often, because it takes it out of you. You're knackered. So most of the new comics I'd meet, they all sort of lived in these cities, and I was the exception. So I was doing like 4 hours travelling more than they were. So I was gigging at best once a week, and you need to be gigging like every night to get decent, to get the practice in. Once a week's just not enough to get really good. And that was probably one of the most frustrating things about it, knowing that where I lived hindered the fact that I'd ever get any good at it. So basically I did a tiny amount of gigs compared to other new comedians, which annoyed me, but in some ways I'm kind of proud of. Because most new comedians who I'd met were breaking into paid work after about 100, 150 gigs. I was starting to break into paid work after 25 gigs. That's how many gigs I did before lockdown, 25, over about 18 months. I did 1 or 2 in the first 6 months, and then I hammered it about once a week for the next 6 months. 12 months. Quick maths. But enough chit chat. I'm now going to show you what this was all building towards, and I feel like I've absolutely built this up over the past however many minutes this has been. So just lower your expectations, because otherwise you're going to come away disappointed. This is the video, the last gig I did before we went to lockdown in March 2020. This was a middle spot, 10 minutes one of the middle acts, in the middle of the show, audience is nice and warmed up. And there's two things you need to know before seeing it. One is the camera angle is deceiving. I had to hide it away in the back corner and it makes the crowd look tiny. There's at least 1,000 people there in my dreams. There's probably about 80, 100 people, something like that. And the second thing, there was a guy in the front row called John, who when the MC asked him what he did for a living, he replied saying he worked for SpaceX, Elon Musk's space travel company thingamajig. And it was incredible. Him talking back and forth with the MC for a good 5 minutes about what it's like working for SpaceX. And everyone in the room, you could tell, was genuinely like, oh, bloody hell, this guy's dead interesting. He works for SpaceX. Listen to all these stories. Anyway, he then said he was lying. He was messing about, and he actually is a shelf stacker in Tesco's. He was lying about working for Elon Musk. Which, hearing me say that back now, I'm like, how did anyone fall for that? But honestly, it was dead convincing. If he hadn't said out, I'd have left thinking he worked for Elon Musk. Anyway, that's all you need to know. Here we go. Sit back, relax, get a brew, and enjoy it. 10-minute stand-up.
Thank you very much. How are we doing? Are we well? Excellent. So my name's Jack. I am half Dutch. My mum's Dutch. I don't think people are that surprised when I say I'm half Dutch, because I've got that sort of Dutch look, haven't I? You know, that sort of tall, skinny, lanky, gangly, greasy, drugged up, brothel creeping, hippie, dairy farming, orange loving, cheese eating, windmill bashing, clog dancing, allotment growing, pushback riding, techno party, leather loving, sausage gobbling, blonde hair, blue eyes, alien, hit the youth look. Like the bleeding Box Rap family. No, there's always a bit of Dutch culture on my childhood growing up, some of that was good, some of that involved wearing clogs. But Dutch culture's quite different. If anybody's been to Holland, you'll know this. I'll give you an example. In Holland, if you put your finger in a dike, you've saved the country from flooding. Yeah, you put your finger in a dike over here, different story, innit? Yeah. I mean, I think my mum got a bit of a culture shock, especially with my dad, because my dad's a Yorkshireman, proper proud working class Yorkshireman, my dad, and I think that gave my mum a bit of a shock, especially like from the very beginning, because my dad likes to take the piss. Like on the first date when my mum offered to go Dutch and pay for half the bill, and my dad offered to go Yorkshire and pay for none of the bill. Because my dad is proper tight, he lives up to that Yorkshire stereotype, he is tight as a nun's chuff. I'm pretty sure he wipes his ass with both sides of the bog roll. He used to tell us that money's like a finger up the arse, better off yours than someone else's. Which brings a whole new meaning to being tight, doesn't it? But he passed down a very special wallet. This is a Yorkshire wallet passed down from generation to generation, from stingy bastard to stingy bastard. A Yorkshire wallet, I tell you what, don't like being opened. Just a standard Yorkshire wallet. Now, my dad likes to take the piss, and sometimes you don't know if he's being serious or not. Like, we're all pretty sure now he voted for Brexit just to get rid of my mum. That's where we're at. Day of the vote, he got our bags packed already, kept telling her that Brexit means Brexit. Now we're in this transition as well. My dad's got signed what's called a naturalisation form on behalf of my mum, basically saying that although she is a Dutch citizen, she is settled in the UK and she does not need to be deported. And my dad keeps conveniently forgetting to sign the form. Although my mum got the last laugh, she said it all ended in disappointment. It was the last time my dad tried pulling out something European. This was the result. To which my dad looked at me and said, Jesus Christ, if that's the result, I want a second referendum. No, enough about Brexit now. A lot of people ask, can you speak Dutch? And to that I always say, yeah. It was quite complicated though, because my mum, when we were little, my mum would do her best to make sure we can speak Dutch, and my dad would do his best to make sure we can speak Yorkshire, and so we ended up speaking a weird mix of both. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard Yorkshire mixed with Dutch, but I'll give you an idea. Just picture a little 4-year-old me, first day of nursery, trying to make friends with all the new kids, going up to him like, hey up kid, I'll soften an angle to you over your tongue, pissing where there's brass in the class, oh, I put wood in the ja zeker hoor, toch. We're standing here, let's start up Yorkshire, aye, cracking, lekker, piss and flapping. Bit of Dutch for there, guess what piss and flapping means? Piss flaps. It's a good job my mum ain't here. Christ. Yeah. So very complex language, Dutch. Has anybody here ever been to Holland? Yeah. You've been to Holland? You've been to Holland, John? Yeah, if ever there's a man who looked like he's been in the red light district, it's the man who lies about going to SpaceX. But very complex language. Even Google Translate can't understand Dutch, that's true. It's too complicated, you can't do it. If I've got signal, I'll show you what I mean. You just can't do it, it's too complicated. Right, we'll try this. Okay, Google.
Hi, Jack, how can I help?
Google Translate Dutch. Lekker gezellig gaan met de hele kleine pim op je hoofd en een hagels lach en een pannenkoeken, ja?
No, thanks. Shut the fuck up, you little Dutch bastard.
I've got a lot of spare time.
So, please stop searching for Claire Balding.
To be fair, that was research for a joke. The one about finger in a dyke. Anyway, Yorkshire wallet, eh? Fucking hell. I probably should explain that wallet, by the way. I used to be a bit of a magician as a kid, that's why I got the wallet. I used to do a lot of magic tricks. I was pretty good. My dad used to call me a part-time wizard. No, sorry, full-time knobhead. He used to tell me that magic is like foreskin, cheesy, and ultimately just a cover for a bell end. But I ended up quitting. Not my biggest fan. I ended up quitting magic because of something that happened to me when I was 12 years old, almost 2 years ago. And what happened was, I was going busking, right, and there was about 10 or 15 people in front of me. I was doing a card trick, and it was a hot day, so I was sweating, and I was quite nervous. I'd never been busking before, but I was doing alright. I was doing a card trick, and as I went over to do this card trick, I felt a bowel movement, right? Now, you know them farts you do, you're not sure if you've got a bit of a sweaty crack. Or if you've actually burst a little brown bum bubble. Well, I'm not going to lie to you, I pebble dashed my boxers, like, it's proper chocolate thunder all down my leg, publicly humiliated. And even then I remember thinking, oh, pissing flapping. But I shit myself in public, and my brother was there, my little brother, he likes to take the piss as well, and he thought it'd be a good idea to tell all my mates at school, and so they had told everybody else at school, and for the next 7 years, all throughout school, I were known as SpongeBob Shitpants. Everyone used to call me that, including my grandma. It's not even clever. Squidward would have been clever. But no, SpongeBob, who lives in pineapple shits in his pants? That's me. So I ended up quitting doing magic, and I didn't do the trick I was going to do. So if you're up for a laugh, I'm going to do the trick and hopefully not shit myself in public. Are we up for a laugh? Say yes. Yay! Excellent. I'm going to do, a lot of magicians do what we call sleight of hand. I'm going to Dutch it up, I'm going to do some sleight of nipple, alright now. Oh yeah, in Holland they call me the master of manipulation. And for this to work, I need the help of you, John. Yay! You don't need to come up, it's not that sort of show, don't worry. Right, he's very disappointed. Alright, John, I want to know you've got black cards and red cards, alright? You're going to take either the black cards or the red cards from me. What are you going to take? I'm going to take black cards. You're going to take away the black cards, that's fine. And over here we've got the red cards, so what the hearts or the diamonds? I'm going to take. Do you want the diamonds, do you want to get rid of them or use them? Use the diamonds. Out of all the diamonds, do you want a number card or a picture card? Picture, out of all the picture, what pictures do you want? Jack, Queen or King? Jack of diamonds. Imagine if we took the Jack of diamonds, folded it in half, folded it in quarters and put the Jack of diamonds inside John's right pants pocket. Go ahead, John. Jack of diamonds we're after. I'm only joking, mate. Not that good. Don't feel very good being lied to, does it, John? A disappointing climax, John knows exactly what it's about. But John, I promised you some sleight of nipple. See, before the show I took a card and I duct taped it to my nipple. Now this is the awkward bit where what seems like a 12-year-old gets the nipples out on stage. Friday night in Burscough, eh? You all felt like, what was the card? What was it? The Jack of Diamonds. One card folded up this whole time, taped to my nipple. Fucking nailed it. And if anyone's thinking, oh, he's still us there, just bear in mind that about an hour ago in the car park, I was sat alone, pouring lighter fluid in my wallet and duct tape and a playing card to me. Yeah. Who's the real dickhead, you know what I mean? I did that trick once, the guy came up to me and said, that's a shit trick, if you're really a magician, can you make my kids disappear? I said, Dad, leave us alone, I'm working. Right guys, you've been absolutely great, I've been Jack Rhodes. Thank you very much.
There we have it. A strong 6 out of 10. By the way, that trick at the end, I didn't want to say this before because it'd ruin it, but that didn't always go like that. Where I get the trick wrong and then reveal it's right at the end. The idea came about because at another gig I did before that, at Hot Water Comedy Club, I genuinely got the trick wrong. And there's a video on YouTube posted by the Hot Water Comedy Club that shows the entire set. You can watch it if you want. It probably gives a good idea of where the act was at the time and how it's progressed since. But yeah, I did the trick, got them to pick the card, took the card off my nipple, unfolded it, realised I'd got the wrong card, and then just off the cuff, I thought, well, there's no recovering this. Jack of Diamonds fucking nailed it. Put it in my pocket and I walked off. And the MC came up to me afterwards, he said, that wasn't supposed to happen, was it? I said, nah, was it obvious? He said, no, but to be fair, it's probably funnier that way. You should do it like that. Pretend you got it wrong, and then if you want, you can always turn it around and say you've got it right. It's just a funnier thing, building it up that whole time, to then just blasé get it wrong. And that was the same MC at the Hot Water Comedy Club as the guy you saw in the clip just then, a guy called Freddy Quinne. He's a funny comedian, you should check him out. So on that night you just watched, we agreed that I would put the card in my pocket and he would then come up, take the card out of my pocket and show it to everyone, thereby revealing that I did get the trick right. And as you saw in the clip, it just kind of elevated it. There was like the round of applause when I walked off, and then he revealed the card was right, and then they all went crazy. Unreal. Now this video could have been so much longer. There's so much stuff I've missed out. I could talk about this stuff and the process that goes into it for hours and hours. And I lied a little bit before. I said that clip that I just showed you, the 10 minutes, was the last gig I did. But actually, I did a couple of gigs after the second lockdown in about September time of 2020, where I'd written a load of new stuff and I ventured into the side of musical comedy.
It's not exactly the sexiest instrument, is it? You know, most guitarists and drummers, sometimes they get girls come up to them after the show. I get all the women asked if I know how to play when I'm cleaning windows. Which I can. See, you've got to get it where you can.
And them gigs made me realise that in the months of lockdown, I'd not really missed doing stand-up that much. I was kind of happy that I didn't have to bother with the late nights, the long drives, the rubbish gigs. And also the fact that I set up this YouTube channel during lockdown, and I kind of realised that it was never about getting a live buzz, it was about the creative outlet, I think. And I don't want to get too pretentious, but, you know, basically I just had loads of ideas in my head. And because stand-up, you're constantly honing the same thing. You only ever talk about the same thing. So I just felt like I was talking about my Yorkshire and Dutch side of the family for 18 months. Because to get good, you've got to hone the same thing over and over. But I've got too many ideas in my head, too many random crazy shit floating about, that I just now think that videos and doing what I'm doing on the YouTube channel is what I want to do. So I've decided that this marks the end of my long and prestigious career as a stand-up comedian. I feel like I've kind of got what I wanted out of it. It was great and I met some great people, but that's the end of the road for now. And this video is as much for you to watch as it is for me to look back in years' time and think, oh bloody hell, remember that time where I did stand-up comedy for a bit? Remember that weird phase of your life where you craved attention from random strangers in pubs and then you realised you could get more and more people online? Such a weird thing, innit? Doing these videos and try to make people laugh and stuff. Honestly, if you looked into the psychology of it, you'd probably unearth some horrific things, but I'll just choose to ignore it. Just keep watching. So there we go. If you've come this far and you aren't already subscribed, you may as well, you know, support me on my new venture as a dickhead millennial YouTuber. Which reminds me, don't forget to smash that like button and leave a comment down below.